You're listening to She's the Business podcast. How is it possible to go traveling for 8 months with your 2 kids, with your husband, to be prioritizing life, experiences, travel, fun times, and be running your business at the same time? Well, today I'm taking you behind the scenes on exactly what I did to be able to do exactly that. It has just finished. My 8-month trip has just finished and successfully managed to be growing my business while I was traveling. So today, if you listen in, I'm going to share with you what those things were behind the scenes that I did that helped that to happen, helped me to actually live the dream, the intention that we had when we went on that trip. So stay tuned. It's coming right up. Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Osborne, and in my 23 years of business and marketing, I've built many brands to become multi-billion-dollar companies. And just in the last 10 years, I've built 2 online businesses of my own from my dining room table with 2 little babies running around at my feet. I've made it my mission to inspire you to get out of your own way and become the successful business owner who's living the lifestyle you really desire without all the hustle. This is She's the Business podcast, made by women for women. This is your weekly dose of motivation and inspiration.
Now, if you're a coach, a consultant, or a service-based business owner, and you're really tired of being told to do this or that, implementing someone else's method, all of the steps, and then still finding that it's really, really hard to attract the right clients. You're not hitting your profit goals, you're miles away from it, and it's all just feeling super time consuming and hard work. And maybe you just don't even like what they've told you to do. Like maybe they've said, go and cold DM people who you find on Instagram, and you are just not in the energetic space of the cold DM. Well, guess what? This just means that instead of following someone's method, which has worked for them, it's actually about defining your core strategy that underpins these methods that you might use and actually makes any method you choose successful. So you can choose the ones that you like the best. Imagine that. You don't have to do those cold DMs at all. In fact, I highly recommend not doing it. You can choose whatever works for you, and also knowing how to choose the right thing so that you've got a flow with no gaps, with no breaks in the journey where people are just dropping through that hole and never making it through to the end. Well, yes, there is a way to do that, right? This is called a strategic framework where you've got the pieces and there's a way that you put it together, you connect these pieces so that there is flow in your business, so there's alignment with you and alignment with your goals. And this framework I've developed is called the Jam Plan. I offer it to you inside Business Jam, which is my program. Now, this is a coaching program with online content, with live coaching, with training, and with a beautiful supportive community, which I think is so important, that you're not with all this information and figuring it out on your own and feeling like, well, am I doing it right? Am I not doing it right? What is going on? Actually having other people who are there with you, who have similar businesses, who can be your cheer squad, who can give you that support, motivation, and actually also give you some real good feedback as well as getting advice and coaching, of course, from me in the program. Now, that's all waiting for you inside Business Jam. The doors currently, right this moment, are closed. However, they will be opening again, and sooner than you really know. They'll be coming up really soon. So get your name on the wait list now. Now, I have a priority wait list, and this priority wait list is for those who think, I really want to be first. I like to be first in line. I like to get the best seats. I like to have all of the best things, the VIP room at the club with the champagne and the canapes. I like that kind of treatment. Well, if that's you, get your name on the priority waitlist, please. And you will be first in line. You'll be first to know. There will be some extra things coming your way that the people who are in the main line won't know about. So get your name on the priority waitlist. You will be first to hear about Business Jam when it's opening next, and to be the first ones able to take that step forward and come into my inner circle and really think about, well, it might not be right for you, but you'll be able to make that choice because you'll be there, you'll be hearing about it before anybody else. So no obligation, of course. You can just put your name on the list. You can still decide at the time whether it's right for you, whether you want to join or not. But by putting your name on the list, it means that you're obviously going to be first and best dressed if you decide to take that step forward. So head over to jessicaosborne.com/business jam waitlist and get your name on the list. I've dropped that link as well below for you in the show notes. So you can go ahead and click on that and get your name on the list right now. And look out for the first goodies that come your way as the VIPs on my priority list.
Hello, my beautiful people. So good to connect with you today. Now, most of you will know if you follow me elsewhere, on my Instagram or even on Threads. I've been loving Threads lately, but that is another story. That I have recently returned from an 8-month-long caravan trip with my kids, with my husband around Australia. And I have had many questions. People have been asking, how did you actually do that? What was it like for your business? What are the things that made it work? What are the things that you struggled with? And really, I thought today's episode would be a really fun behind the scenes peek into what it took to take my business on the road for 8 months with the family, camping in the remotest parts of Australia and traveling where there is zero internet reception, no mobile reception, not even SOS phone calls. So how on earth do you continue to run an online business when you're in that sort of environment? What did I need to do? What are the lessons that I learned, or maybe the challenges that I had? What are those things behind all of the fun pictures that you might have seen on Instagram? I was updating my stories regularly with pics of, where we were and stuff that we were doing. But, everybody wants to know, well, is that what it was really like? Or was there some other stuff going on in the background that we weren't showcasing on Instagram? So today's episode, I'm taking you behind the scenes. I thought, why not do that? Something that was really interesting to me, I think, straight up, was I had, knowing that we were going to be traveling for 8 months and you're with kids 24/7, it wasn't going to be possible to run my business the same way that I did at home when they're at school 5 days a week. And I have, about 6 hours or so of non-kid time on those days. And I knew it was going to have to be different. I also, being realistic, thought, well, I'm probably going to make less while we're away. But having recently just done my end of year tax returns here in Australia, obviously we end them in July, not at the end of the calendar year. It's been really interesting because I actually made more in this financial year that's just finished in July, or end of June, sorry. I'll be correct for my accounting friends there. The one that's just finished, 30th of June. I made more money when I'd been traveling for 7 months of that year than I did the previous financial year. Interesting, huh? So let's hold on to that thought. And now I'll deep dive into some of the aspects of the trip, how I planned for it, what worked, what didn't, and all of the fun stuff. Now, I think one of the first things was actually just submitting to the idea and the notion of being really, really flexible. So I am, I guess, naturally a person who is quite flexible. I do not need or love loads and loads and loads of structure because I tend to feel a bit claustrophobic. Of course, I like structure. I love processes in my business. I love automation. And interestingly, I built a lot more of that into my business before I left. But I also knew that this was going to allow me to be more flexible. Funny, huh? It's kind of like complete dead opposites. So the more structure I had, the more flexible I could be. So what does that even mean? Let me explain a little bit more about it. The flexibility I was going to require was, just being able to do the stuff I needed to do for my business, such as recording podcast episodes, having coaching sessions with clients, the little bit of interaction with my team, maybe doing a bit of social media here and there. I needed it to be absolutely flexible with the timing. So not locked in to any particular schedule, because I was like, that's going to be the very first thing that's could go very, very wrong, right? When you're traveling, and if you said, I'm going to do this every single Monday, well, guess what? Some Mondays, it's just not going to be possible, because we're probably driving through a desert where there's nothing and I'm not plugged into power, and I've got no reception or anything to work with. And, maybe our schedule's just not even going to allow it because of the trip. So that was the first thing. I was like, I need to be super flexible with my timing. Now, you might ask, well, how did you do that and actually still have coaching sessions with clients? And it's like, yeah, really interesting, right? Because we've got so many great tools, available to us, and many of you, I'm sure, already use Calendly. I simply set up my availability. I blocked out days where I knew we were traveling, and I created times. I sort of figured out, well, when is going to be the best times of the day that I could do coaching sessions that isn't going to impact the other stuff that's going on. It's not going to impact us if we're packing up the caravan and about to drive on a 5-hour drive to get somewhere. Then it's not an ideal time to have a coaching session booked in. So I got really clear and made it super simple. These were going to be the best times, these days, and I actually just blocked out the ones that I knew these are potential days it could be not good at all, because the last thing I wanted to do was to cancel or reschedule on my clients. I have run a business so far in the years that I've been doing this where I do not ever not show up for coaching sessions. I never really need to cancel. And it did happen twice, or maybe let's say 3 times. I can think of one in particular I had to cancel on this trip. And that was because we actually broke down in the middle of nowhere on a road, and we ended up having to stay overnight on this dirt road, hundreds and hundreds of kilometers away from the nearest town. I'll say town, it was kind of like a village. We were not anywhere, and it was pretty traumatic. There was a lot of stuff going on, like, can we be safe? We're out in the middle of the bush. There is nobody around us for miles. We had to set up the caravan and make sure that, we were safe, our kids were safe, and all of that stuff was more important than obviously a session. It happened to be a sales call. So I had to do the awkward thing and contact that person and say, hey, look, unfortunately, life has sent me a curveball today and I'm not going to be able to make that session in the morning. I did it ahead of time. I didn't do it at the moment. I said, it's probably not going to happen. Let's reschedule it. And they were very, very gracious. And, of course, they're like, guess what? Life does happen. And they were more than happy to reschedule it. So that is, a one-off example of a time that I actually had to do it. My systems, everything I had in place, yes, it worked 99% of the time. And there was that 1% where, it was something that was completely out of the ordinary, and I wasn't able to find a really good way around it. So yeah, rest of the time though, it worked really well. Now, you might be thinking, well, how did you know when to block things out? And that also meant, yes, we needed to be prepared and have a schedule of our travels. So my husband, that was his job. Lucky him. He was like our trip coordinator. He basically planned out where we were going to stay, what those drives were, so that we knew where we were going to be essentially ahead of time. There were a few blocks of time that we had nothing booked in. And as we got closer to those, I'd say, okay, let's kind of figure out what we're doing then. What days might I be able to do some sessions on? And I just put in a block on a day where I thought, we might have something planned that we want to do. I'm just going to block out a day so that I have a day available for the family, and that, we're going to be able to do what we want to do as well. I'm not going to be tied in to business the whole time simply because we hadn't had a plan up front. So that made life really easy. It was low stress. It worked like clockwork. My clients could book in times when it was appropriate for them. And that worked really well. Now, you might be wondering as well, what about the stuff where you have a program and, there's a format and you need to show up every week? Well, great question, because I made the decision, and it was a difficult one to make at the time, but I made this decision not late last year, actually around this time last year, the middle of last year, to close down my group program, close down my 12-month group program, and also to not run my shorter group programs that I tended to do for Business Jam, which would be a 10-week, VIP intensive group. I decided I can't commit to those while I'm traveling. And as much as I love them, as much as they are amazing, it just is going to cause too much stress and it's going to be too difficult to deliver. And I'd never want to be in that place where I'm not able to deliver on my promises. So I made a big decision to close them down. It's also why I find it incredible that I actually managed to make more money in this last financial year than I did the one before, even with closing down some of my offerings. So that simplified stuff for me. I really had Business Jam, which is my strategic framework, and it's a, do it at your own pace online program that people could join. And yes, there is an element of live coaching with me as well. But what's beautiful about this is I can do it when I have the availability. I can do it at the times that suited me. So I was in control of when that would be, and it could be 100% flexible, which was my criteria, right? So that worked amazingly well. My Business Jam program was there. People could join it and they could get coaching from me either in our members group, Facebook group, if they're posting questions. And I also did some live coaching sessions in that group too, in that program, sorry. So that was happening. And then I had my one-to-ones. And yes, my one-to-ones, I allowed myself to take on a couple of extra one-to-one clients, but making sure that I always had a really good schedule so that I didn't have a lot of intensity all at the one time. So when people join me one-to-one, we tend to have a lot more of an intensive first month. And then it sort of settles down into a bit of an easier flow after that, because the first month is when we're getting in, we're really diving in under the covers and getting very, paying a lot of attention to what's going on. There's some big strategic stuff happening. There's lots of challenging the status quo, and it is intensive for that reason. So I usually don't like to have more than one client in that at a time. And so I managed to have a schedule of one-to-one clients while I was traveling, where I'd have one person just coming out of that, another one starting in. And so I had a really great flow of clients. And as I said before, we had a good way of scheduling our appointments so that it would suit them, it would suit me, and everything just worked. So that was important. What was, I guess, just as I'm talking about the group program, you might be like, well, now that you're back home, are you adding back in all of that stuff? Interesting, right? So I had a lot of time to reflect and to think about what my offerings were and how they were connecting. And one of the insights that I had while I was on the trip was the way that I had structured my group program previously. It was sort of a bit standalone, the 12-month one. And then the 10-week one was usually just not long enough. Like the people who would come into the 10 weeks would finish that 10 weeks and they were like, oh my God, it's not finishing already. I want more. I wanted more. They really wanted to stay in that environment and to be continuing to grow. And so it kind of felt a bit strange. End it, cut it off, and then there wasn't really a next thing, which, looking at that now, it just sounds like, well, why not? Why didn't you create a next thing? Well, there's only so much that you can actually do, right? So while I had grand visions and plans, I want a lean business. And my ultimate goal isn't just to have so many programs that keep me busy and working all the time, but it's like, no, my objective in doing this business in the first place was to have a lifestyle where I had really flexible time as in time I can drop the kids off at school, I can pick them up after school, take them to sports, have time to go to the gym myself, do exercise, actually relax, enjoy time with my friends. I did not want a business that was going to work me harder than what I'd worked in my corporate life. And like way beyond that, I wanted one that was like half the amount of time or even less. So adding in and making more and more service offerings was actually going to take me away from my own goal as opposed to closer to it, because it's not about the money doesn't bring the freedom. The freedom comes from the structure. The freedom comes from the way that you built your business. And then when you've got it all there, the pieces in place, you can look at, well, okay, how do I make this more profitable? And there's so many other levers that we can be tweaking and turning when you have the right structure in place. But if you've created a structure that's going to give you a business that isn't what you want as your outcome, you've just created a game that you cannot win at. It doesn't matter, how successful you are, because you'll be burnt out and you'll be doing all these things that are frustrating you on a daily basis because it's not what you wanted when you started. So I think that's a really important distinction. And I had that time while I was on this trip to be like, right, well, let's start with a blank page. If I was starting right now and taking in some of the insights of what I know has worked well, what I know people love and what they don't love, what could this be? How could this actually still fit within my goals, my lifestyle goals, and the structure that I want for my future business that allows me to work, maybe it's only 2 or 3 hours a day, sometimes with, the weekends fully off to spend with the family. And yeah, I might have a few days where I work more, but maybe there's other days I work none. And that to me is like, that's what I want. So let's design the thing that actually makes that happen. And I came up with a different format of group program, which now that I look at it, it's like, well, why didn't I think of that before? Why was I so busy off creating these new ones and different ones? Something separate, a whole separate program I had to kind of build and run and market. And what I realized was the easiest way to do this was simply to add a group program layer into Business Jam. So it's like, well, I've got the strategy and the framework in the online program. So anyone who's coming in who just wants the strategy, well, they can do that. Then you've got people who know that they want coaching. They actually know that they do so much better with support. They do so much better with, that environment. It's just amazing when you get people together, isn't it? So different to a one-to-one coaching relationship. Like I've seen clients go from the one-to-one into the group and like, boom, suddenly they're into a whole new gear. It's just amazing what they're able to achieve. And I think that this group environment where there's other people in there, but it's small and intimate, it is just so powerful for getting you out of your head and out of the place where it feels like it's just you and into somewhere where, you're actually just taking far more action. So anyway, that made sense to me. Plus, I wanted a place where if someone did start with one-to-one and they finished that intense, that one-to-one program, they still wanted coaching, but they probably didn't need it to be on the one-to-one basis anymore and actually really wanted to be in the environment where they're around others and getting inspiration from what other people are doing. Then this group layer inside Business Jam just makes all the sense, because my one-to-one clients are also working through my Business Jam framework. They're just working with me on a one-to-one basis. So you see, now I have really one thing and just different levels of support. So it's like the lowest support where you're in at the, you're getting the framework and you just want to do that with being able to ask a few questions and some live trainings. Then you've got the group coaching where we actually do 2 sessions a month, which now that I'm home, I can commit to that. It's a really great light and easy layer, but it gets people moving ahead so much faster because there's consistency there, there's support there. And then there's the one-to-one at the top. So this group layer now sits in the middle. It's like my jam in the sandwich. So whether they come in through the bottom layer or through the top layer, they go to the jam in the middle. They go there when they want to accelerate. If they've found, well, I wasn't getting far enough on my own, great, there's somewhere to upgrade into. when they come in from the top and then they're like, now that I've got myself sorted, know where I'm going, I want to continue having support, bam, they just drop into that group and continue with coaching, but on a less one-to-one basis, which just makes it so much more viable. So anyway, that's what I've done. And so I've started this group within Business Jam. It's so exciting. I'm loving seeing the people in there. And the best thing is it's working for me and my lifestyle. So I've taken the best parts out of the older programs that I used to run and kind of morphed that into this way that I'm doing this one now, which is so much easier because I'm not overwhelming people with more and more and more content in different programs. It's like, actually, we're just taking you deeper on the stuff that you've already got, because you can only put so much into an online, Business Jam isn't really a course, but if you think about it, there is recorded online content there. So, but there's only so much you can really put into that, because otherwise it would become incredibly long. So it's like, right, what are the key pieces people need? What are the steps they need to take? And I put that in. And then inside the accelerator coaching group, we can obviously take that and in a live environment, deep dive on it. Actually really uncover, go deeper on the messaging, go deeper on their pricing and how they're building their offers, go deeper on their targeting, what their niche is, their authority. All of these pieces all have the ability to go deeper, to really apply what they've learned there to themselves and get that moment of like, aha, yes, I've actually got it and nailed it. And sometimes it takes being able to share it in a group environment, being able to share it with other people for it really to land. So anyway, I digress. You can tell I love talking about this, but I'm here telling you more about how I could take my business on the road for 8 months in a caravan with 2 kids, with a husband, and be spending, 80% of my time, maybe even more of that, enjoying traveling, enjoying being in the places. I did not miss out on anything our family was doing. There were a few times I would send them away from the caravan. So you might be thinking, well, how did you record a weekly podcast? I didn't do it every week. That's the first clue. I was staying ahead of the game. So I had podcast recordings already in the bag that were scheduled in, and I just made sure I was staying ahead of the game. I think there was one week where it got down to the week of, and I needed to record because my podcast manager was saying, hey, we got to get an episode. I'm like, oh my goodness, sorry. I've really almost dropped the ball on that, but we didn't drop the ball. I got it recorded. It came out, and we have kept up a consistent episode every single week since, it was going well before I went on the trip. But it did not stop while I was traveling for 8 months, simply because, again, I put a bit of structure in place behind with those podcast episodes. Now, I did have to tell my kids and my husband to, please make yourself scarce. Why don't you go for a bike ride, go for a walk, do something while I'm recording, so that I could have quiet, so I could have a good background. But there were many things that I guess I had to compromise on. And podcasters who are listening to this today, you might be thinking, well, what about, having a good sound room, where the audio quality is really good? And what about lighting and all of those things? There's a lot that can go into producing a podcast. And yes, you can optimize it to the very, very professional degree. I had to make a few compromises. I had to be like, you know what? I think it's more important that I produce the podcast and get it out than it is picture perfect, audio, absolute perfect quality. Because if I'm trying to hold myself to those standards, then it's probably not going to happen. Like, we are going to be staying in caravan parks, and I can't control what's going on outside and around me. Like, if I happen to have a spare hour where I've got a little bit of time, the others aren't around, I want to bang out an episode, and then someone starts doing their drill to drill in their pegs on their, their caravan awning. Well, I cannot help that. But what I can do the best that I had with what I had to hand. I also did not travel with my podcasting microphone. I traveled with these headphones that I'm still using right now today. So if you're on my video right now on YouTube, then you might see me holding them up. They're headphones with a microphone that you can use. It's probably not the ideal sound quality, and I know my podcast manager would love me to get the mic back out. So now that I'm home, been in the house a week or so, I'm definitely going to get my old setup happening again. But it was like, hey, I don't need to take all of that stuff on a trip. I'm just going to use something that will be good enough to capture the sound. And hopefully I will be lucky in that there's not going to be anything crazy happening around me when I'm trying to record. Once or twice, I did have to give it up. I had to think, okay, it is not going to be today because there's a million birds squawking around our caravan and they're so loud. I'm getting distracted by them. There were other times that, there were kids, there was everyone running in and out, and I just couldn't get that time to be in a nice, quiet space. So, hey, that's fine, right? Because if you're ahead of schedule and you've got episodes in, then I'd just say, well, that's okay. Can't do it today. When is the next time I might be able to do it? And I'd look for a little block of time, suggest to my husband he takes them away somewhere, and we get it done. Now, actually, there's one other thing that I did experience, and I can't remember if I've talked about this on the podcast yet or not, but obviously with an online business, even with recording these, I'm recording to Zoom at the moment, you need internet, right? So what do you do when you are remote, when you're in places with no internet? This was one of my things that, I was like, best decision ever that we made right before we left on the trip. We decided to invest in the Starlink satellite by Elon Musk because at the time it had coverage over most of Australia, and the word on the street, or word on their website, I should say, they said they were going to have full coverage by early 2023, even in top northern Western Australia where there is nobody. They said they were going to have full coverage over the whole country by then, which would work out fine for us because we weren't getting up there until, around April, May. And so we invested in the satellite and it has been brilliant. We've literally had high-speed broadband where we're down on the tip of a peninsula, really close to, or as close as we get to the Antarctic, where there's, you are hundreds and thousands of k's away from the nearest city and really only tiny little villages in between, being on deserts. We went right down into the red centre of Australia, out to Uluru, full internet coverage. The only thing, which is kind of funny, is if there are overhead trees, it does not like it. And I did have a few experiences with the audio dropping out briefly because where we were positioned, where I could get the Starlink satellite dish, there might have been a tree that would occasionally just sort of block the signal for a few seconds. And so, of course, that was something my poor podcast manager had to deal with editing the audio. If it ever, needed to remove out any of these little pauses. And touch wood, thank goodness that when I was interviewing other people while we were away, that happened very rarely. We did have a couple of episodes where it was happening, and I'd have to say to them, hey, we just dropped out then. Let's just go back and restart off from where you were. And we would just try to pick back up from where we were at and carry on again. And they were very, very obliging. So I thank you so much if you're one of those people and you obliged with our internet. Really, we were doing the best that we could. The funny thing was, it's like fully high speed and it was just trees. Trees got in our way. And of course, caravan parks love trees because they think people want shade. In Australia, it gets really hot at times of the year. So there tends to be trees and in some places. So that was probably my biggest challenge, actually, was saying to my husband, remember to book a site and say no overhead trees, please. Sometimes you just could not avoid them because they were everywhere in the caravan park. And even if you didn't have any directly overhead of your caravan, they're probably still going to be blocking the signal a bit. So that was just something that we had to be flexible about. Had to be okay with, hey, it may not happen so well, it might not work that well. Once or twice with a coaching call with a client, we actually just decided, let's use the phone instead of doing Zoom. So that's okay. The phone worked fine. Definitely with the Starlink satellite, it was really easy to have phone calls. It was just the video. The bandwidth was all there, but it would just drop out, which can be really frustrating when you're talking to someone and suddenly they freeze. So that was one of the challenges that happened behind the scenes. I wasn't really sharing a lot of that on my Instagram stories. I was more sharing the wonderful places that we were and some of my amazing, workspaces for the day, where I might be, our caravan was parked up right on the edge of a beach or on the cliff overlooking, a stunning landscape, the river, out in the outback, and just looking out over the land, beautiful sunsets. I had some of the best views from my office, shall we call it, my outdoor office, if I was doing those outside. And often I was inside the caravan, especially for the podcast, just to try to get the sound quality a bit better. So those were some things. I'm just having a look at my notes to see whether there was anything else I wanted to share with you. And I think the other major thing, this is, what made it work, was my team. Now, you might think, okay, well, it's fine for you. You've got a team. I don't have a big team. And actually, my team, none of them are full-time. I have a few people who help me with the business. They work part-time, but we have very clear structure and processes in place. And what that meant was they're very self-sufficient. They know what they've got to do, they know how to do it, and they can get on with it. And so they didn't actually need me to be managing them on a daily basis. And I think that is probably the mic drop moment, boom. If you have a team and you have to be there every moment, managing what they're doing, checking it, all of those things, then you've created a new job for yourself and your business. So you might have stepped away from some of the tasks that are, stuff that you don't love, or things that are admin and low level tasks that you don't need to be doing. You might have stepped away, but if you haven't created the autonomy for your team members to be able to operate without you, then you've just shifted your job into being the one of the manager. And trust me, I've been there before. I've had staff members when I used to be back in my corporate days and had teams. There were some people who were very, very needy in terms of they wanted me across everything. And I realized, what was that difference between those people and the ones who were absolutely fine getting on with what they had? And I realized that it was actually confidence, but not so much just confidence that they had to build in themselves. I could actually help them have the confidence by making sure that they knew exactly what they needed to be doing. They didn't have to make it up as they went along. They had it all at their fingertips, and it was simple. And so that was something I've focused on with my team over the last couple of years, is removing their need to have me be involved in everything. I don't want to be involved in it all. I want to say, here is what I want. Here's how I want it done. Then go and do it. And so setting up one by one processes, automations, telling them how I want things done, what I want, what does success actually look like? That has meant now that I'm able to step away. I'm able to not be there. And I've had to figure out what were the right roles in the team that I needed, who were the right people to be in them. Yes, there were definitely some pieces that have taken a bit of time to settle in and bed down. But once I'm there, guess what? It was the easiest thing possible, because I had full confidence in my team members, and between us all doing the bits that we were each doing, I was doing the things I needed to do, they were doing the things they needed to do, the business kept on flowing. It kept on working, operating, and growing, which is amazing, right? So I'm very, very grateful to have those people. But I'm also not going to take away from the fact that yes, there was work involved in getting that to happen. It wasn't just like, oh, by chance I've happened to hire this amazing unicorn and they can do everything and I can just, take my hands off and walk away. It's like, no, I actually needed to take responsibility for my business. I needed to take responsibility for them having the clarity of what it was that they needed to be doing. And of course, having an open communication channel, they could always ask me questions. But the great thing was that you can see when it's working because they're not coming and asking questions every day. They were just occasional, like, hey, what about this or that? And I could give them an answer. So that worked an absolute treat. Definitely could not have done it without them, or I could have, but then I would have been compromising on my travel time. I would have had to work more hours if I was doing things on my own. And the whole point of doing this trip, it's a once in a lifetime thing. We're never going to be in that time of my kids' lives where they were 6 and 9. Even if we do another trip, it's not going to be the same again because they won't be the same. We won't be the same. It just was amazing to have that experience, and I wanted to be there for 100% of it. So for me, my priority was to enjoy every moment of the trip, to be saying yes to things, to be doing the experiences, and to be not saying, oh, no, I can't because I have to work, and I didn't want that to happen, but it was amazing. So, I'm just absolutely thrilled with how it worked out. You never know until you do it. But I had to believe that it was possible, do what I could do to get set up before we left so that the things that were important to me, like that vision, I could execute on it because we'd done the right things beforehand that made it work. What else happened behind the scenes? I'm trying to think. Something that I found really funny, because I do try to, I write my own social media content. I don't post often my own content, like I'll write it. My VA, takes my content and she will schedule it in, but I do write all of my own words. And, I take my own pictures, obviously, but I do create my own reels at times. And, it was funny because anytime I'd be out walking, doing something with activity, I just have all these ideas of content in my brain. And so, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, it's really not the best time to be recording a reel where I'm talking when I'm, out exercising, I'm probably puffing, I'm sweaty, my voice isn't going to be the best. I'm sure they're not going to be loving listening to it. But it was like, gosh, this idea, this stream of consciousness was just in my head. I needed to get it out. And so I did quite a few of those. Those were my off the fly, off the cuff content that I create while we were traveling. And usually, yes, with me outside, walking, doing something, because those were the times that the ideas would come to me of boom, this is what I need to talk about today. So yes, I would do that. And yes, I would put it together because, I'd recorded it on my phone. Obviously, I'm nowhere near my VA. I can't just hand her the phone and say, here, take this and go and do something with it, which I never do anyway, because she's not located in the same place as me. But that's, definitely what I was doing that was helping me to have some, really authentic content, which was great. Yes, can't get much more authentic than that. And just getting me to kind of get over myself and get it out there as well, because it's like, well, hey, it's not going to be perfect. That's okay. It's not really about the perfection of it. It's about the message. And right now, I've got that energy of delivering the message. I've got the thing I want to say. I know I can nail it if I say it. It was just always off the cuff. It was very natural content. And that worked for me because, again, didn't need to plan it, didn't need to prep for it. I literally turn on the phone while I'm walking, try to slow down my walk a little bit so that I wasn't, tearing along while I was speaking, and just get it done. Easy, right? I think so many times we put barriers in our own way because we make rules around how it has to be and what you need to do and all of these things. And it's like, well, what if I just do it? What if I don't have those things? Do I really need them, or am I just telling myself I need them? I love to challenge the perfectionist in me, something I've been working on for years now, since I realized that perfectionism actually wasn't one of my best qualities. It was probably holding me back from a lot of things. I've been, consistently addressing that voice of perfection in my head, the things that would stop me in the past from, from sharing, where I would think, oh, I just can't put that out there. I don't like how I look. I don't like how I talk. And now I'm like, well, you know what? I don't have to like it because it's not for me. I'm not sharing this because I want to listen to my own voice. In fact, I never listen to my own voice. I don't turn these on and listen to myself because I don't want to. I've already said it, and I'm saying it because I'm hoping that what I'm sharing today is helping someone else who's like, oh my goodness, yes, I do get stuck there. I do get stuck putting things out. And if I can show up and say, hey, it's okay. Like, look, I've done it. And what did you think about that? Did you think it was terrible? Are you sitting there criticizing what I've put out there? Or are you actually really glad that I've said this? Do you care that I'm outdoors and sweaty and maybe wearing a funny hat? No, probably not. You don't really care, right? Because what does it even matter? It doesn't matter at all. And so that's why I do it. That's why I like to share and just, I don't script things. I don't script these podcast episodes. I love to just get on here and speak from the heart and really give you exactly what is on my mind at 100% of the time. So that's what you get with me. Anyway, lovely. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it when I get reviews from listeners on my podcast, and it's so easy to do. If you're listening to this right now, all you have to do is scroll down to the bottom of the podcast on your phone and tick those 5 boxes, and then there's a link there that will say write a review, and you can add a few words as well. I love them. I read every single one. I have a thing called Chartable. I say a thing, a platform. It sends me, so every time I get a review, it'll actually send me the text into my email. And so I save every one of them. I've read all of them. I read them out here on the podcast from time to time, give shout outs to the people who leave me a review. And I really, really appreciate it. And that's why I also take time to review other people's podcasts that I listen to and enjoy, because I think that's a really great way of attracting that same behavior back to me. Like, I love to give out what I'm going to get back. And that could be a really good topic for another episode, couldn't it? So I'll leave it there today. Thank you for joining me, and I will speak to you next week. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of She's the Business podcast. I hope that you've been enjoying it as much as I have in creating the content to bring to you. So I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate your presence and your attention. Now, if you love the podcast, or maybe you just loved today's episode, then I would absolutely appreciate it if you would go to Apple Podcasts, scroll down, hit the 5 stars, and then leave me a short review about what it was that you really enjoyed in this episode, or maybe in the podcast overall. And when I receive those reviews, then I love to give those reviewers a shout out on my future podcast episodes. So you never know, you may hear your name getting a shout out in a future episode if you do that. So thank you once again for your time, and I'll see you next time on She's the Business.